Hey folks, it's Sam. What's going on here? Am I live? Yeah, sorry. Okay, sorry. Looks like a little technical stuff here. Okay, so I'm talking today about Venus, and we have debilitated Venus in the sky right now, and I'm talking about how to look at Venus astrologically and philosophically as the symbol and as the energy of happiness, accommodation, love, romance, sexuality, and how to improve your life and relationships, understanding Vedic astrology principles. And in the sky right now, as I said, Venus just became debilitated. I just posted a link for those of you who are interested in getting some more in-depth teaching about this. I've put together some courses on that and some free teachings that'll help you understand relationships and relationship astrology a lot better. And you can just go ahead and when you click the link, you go to this page here and you can just enter your name and email address and click I want these classes and you'll get it. Easy stuff, easy to do. And again, I'll just send you a few teachings about this because it's quite in depth. You have to understand the nature of Venus as an indicator or as a karaka, and then different qualities of it through the three gunas and whatnot, which I'm going to explain here today. So we're also going to be looking at the chart here today as well, of course, like I always do. As you can see right now in the sky, Venus is in Virgo. It just entered Virgo. And so what we can notice here in general about the nature of Venus is related to its quality as a what's called Rajasic planet. Rajas is about happiness, desire, enjoyment. And Venus is one of the Rajasic planets that is motivated toward enjoying life. The other Rajasic planet is Mercury. These are the two planets that are most geared towards enjoying life in a healthy way, healthy enjoyment, not overindulgence, not being unreal and, bringing out a lot of fantasies around it, or also trying to hoard it and save it and be selfish and greedy with it. And in fact, this is the real, the reason I explain it like this is because that quality, for example, of selfishness and greediness and possessiveness has a lot to do with the negative qualities of the Tamasic Guna, where we're all about fear and anger and an overemphasis on ourself. That can be very Tamasic, and this sort of Tamasic quality of enjoying life winds up being very much about pleasure and my personal pleasure, or my happiness is the most important, because the Tamasic Guna has most to do with pleasure and how we handle pleasure. The Tamasic Guna, I should say that the Tamasic Guna has more to do with our self personally. That's what I meant to say. And Venus, expressed through the Tamasic Guna, is about pleasure, right? And pleasure is not something where I need to involve anyone else. So the Tamasic Guna itself is about my own emphasis. It could be on my own survival, my own happiness, my own pleasure, my own separate identity, and that creates stress. The Satwik Guna, which is often said to be the ones that are, the most elevated or the highest or the good one. Sattva is great for things like spirituality, spiritual progress, finding higher teachings, higher wisdom. That's what it's for. But it can also bring a lot of projections, where we take something like our interactions with other people, which again is ruled by the Rajasic Guna, because Venus and Mercury are about the Rajasic Guna, which has to do with sharing. When they come through the Satwik Guna of looking for something higher, it can often lead to unrealistic fantasy projections, fantasizing and then disappointment, trying to find God in our partner or in the other person. Other people aren't God. They're flawed people just like you are. And so this is one of the things that also kind of disrupts the nature of Venus to be able to enjoy and share happiness. So Venus is really the planet where we share happiness. Venus and Mercury are where we're very aware of how much we're sharing, how much we're feeling appreciated and respected based on the things we share. When we feel like we care about another person and we want to share with them, we naturally accommodate and give ground on certain things where we don't always have to be right, or we don't always have to be the one who is, getting the best deal. In fact, we like to see the other person happy and just as happy as we are. That's what Venus shows. And Venus shows where not only do I want to have the things that make me happy, but if the things that make me happy are at the expense of your happiness, then I'm not happy either. So if my happiness comes at your expense, then I'm not happy either. And that's what Venus really shows. It shows this sharing. But we also want to know that if I'm willing to sacrifice the thing that makes me happy to make sure that you're happy, I want you to appreciate it. Right? That's where it starts to get complicated. Because then we think, well, I'm willing to not be so happy if it's going to make you happy, but then you have to appreciate that I'm doing it. Otherwise, I'm not happy about that. So it's not selfless. It's just important to also understand. It's not selfless love. It's transactional love. Selfless love is related to the moon. And selfless love is Satwik. That's Satwik, where we just give it with no desire or expectation of it being returned. We just give it. Like a mother and a child, or the way we give to our pets. We just want to give them love. We don't want anything in return. But that's not Venus, and that's not romantic relationships either. Many people I think people have more delusions about this than maybe anything in life, is they think that romantic relationships are also selfless love. I think particularly women feel like they need to love selflessly, or they think they are loving selflessly. When they are loving selflessly with children or with pets or even with their friends, friendships are often selfless love to some extent. They have more of that quality. But friendships are the same kind of thing where if we're willing to give up something, we want to know at least that the other person appreciates it. Or we notice that they give up some things too, and there's a balance there. And so Venus has this job, very subtle job. And in many ways, the Venus energy incorporates the moon energy. It kind of incorporates that selfless love into it. But then it brings it into something very transactional. So we can always selflessly love people. We can selflessly love everybody. And in fact, we're supposed to, including our romantic partners or business partners or whoever. Because selfless love is our nature. But that doesn't mean we can have a romantic relationship with everyone, or a business partnership with everyone, or get into some kind of transactional relationship, or even just a close friendship with everyone. Because our values big key word for Venus. Our values and value system might be very different. So even though we can love them as a person, we might have to do it from a distance, because when we start engaging with them, our values are too different, and we don't, and our values don't feel respected and appreciated. We're living in very charged times right now about things like politics, for example, and families and politics and all of these values, where it's very hard to want to engage with others, where our values are so different. It doesn't mean we don't still care about them and want them to be happy and whatnot, but it's hard to be engaged in that dynamic. Being engaged in that dynamic is Rajasic energy. That's what Rajas is. So the Rajasic Guna, which is Mercury and Venus, are the ones that are engaged with life, certainly people, in real time. Mercury through conversations and ideas and thinking about things and understanding things intelligently. And Venus through that active compromise that I'm explaining. Mercury gives us the idea so that we understand and we can adjust, let's say, to other people's ideas or just ideas in general. But then Venus gives us that desire to actively compromise and make the other person happy as much as we're happy, that thing that I said before. Venus makes us sensitive to that. And this is why Venus is also related to things like manners and politeness. And that's where appreciation comes from. Appreciation comes from noticing that. Noticing that someone did something nice for you or said something nice to you. So right now, Venus just went into Virgo. And Venus is in its debilitated sign when it's in Virgo, because Virgo is very much about all these little details and kind of worrying about all these details, where we're sort of keeping score. One second. Virgo is kind of like the accountant a little bit, where we're keeping score. And it's good for very detailed, precise kind of work. And this this precision is really shown in, like, for example, when Venus is in Virgo, you could definitely have a lot of skill, like with the arts, with, again, other kind of detailed, precise work. And it brings a lot of discrimination and discernment, but it also can show where we're looking for the flaw and looking for the thing that is that's not correct, that's not accurate, that's not, that's not right, that's not specific. And this has a tendency to make that Venus part of us unhappy and brings a certain amount of suffering to that Venus part of us. Because Venus, again, is the part that wants to get along with others. Venus is the part that wants to be in a harmonious flow with others, a harmonious interaction with others. That's what Venus is. And it's the part of you that feels bad when that's not happening. Feels bad when people don't like you, or feels bad when people are at odds with each other. Wanting everyone to get along is satisfying in that Venus realm. And so in Virgo, where we're noticing all the, Virgo is literally the sign where we notice the flaws, we notice the mistakes, we notice where things are not quite right. This is where Mercury is exalted. Because for Mercury, that kind of energy of noticing all the details, taking them very seriously, not just going, whatever. That's like the culmination of Mercury. That's like the best thing for Mercury, is to feel how important these details are. They're not just trivial. It's not just something to kind of play around with, which is what Mercury can tend to do in detriment. No, in Virgo, we take those details seriously and want to do something about it. And so Venus is debilitated here. And because now all of those details are reasons why we're not happy. Someone just posted this where it says, my favorite quote from Sam about Venus and Virgo is unhappy for every reason, as compared to Venus and Pisces, which is happy for no reason. That's right. Somebody was listening. This is why we can study the exaltation and debilitation points of the planets and the signs. That gives us a great interpretation. So we can interpret them then much better. And the happy for no reason is a quote from my guru Amma, who said that before. She said, someone asked her in a Q&A before, in a question and answer, they said, we talk so much about spirituality and it's so much about devotion and all these things, but, honestly, I don't really want all that stuff. I just want to be happy. Can I just be happy? Is it okay to just want to be happy in life? To just live a happy life? Is that all right? Because it feels bad. It feels wrong from a spiritual perspective. It's an important question. It might be the most important. She got right to the point. She was like, I don't really want all that spiritual stuff. I just want to be happy. Which, by the way, is what everybody's doing. You've all heard me say that before. People act like they're spiritual, but they're really not. They just want to feel good. This is the way I also put it. They want to be happy, which is Venus, and they want to feel good, which is the moon. So people aren't really looking for spirituality. They want to feel happy and they want to feel good. So Amma said, yeah, that's why you're here. You're here to be happy. But happy for no reason, which is Venus in Pisces. It's an exact interpretation. How you could say it, you couldn't say it any better than that. That's the exaltation point of Venus, is where we can be happy for no reason. Everything makes us happy, quote, so to speak. But again, it could be very ungrounded, and happiness in and of itself in this Rajasic is a very emotional thing. Again, and this is where we can get into different things like projection and attachment and all those kinds of things. But we can understand the nature of Venus and the quality of that virtue by looking at Venus in Pisces, where it could be possibly happy for no reason. And the debilitation in Virgo is every reason to not be happy, where everything can make us unhappy, because nothing in life is totally going to work out. And I don't care what it is, especially people and compromises and all of these things that we're usually most involved in. We're most engaged with other people, what other people think of us, how we navigate that, and the things that we want to do to make us happy, to feel good. And none of it is 100% complete. Nothing is total in that regard. And Virgo is the sign where we notice, if it's 99% correct, Virgo is the sign where we'll notice the 1% that's not. That's the nature of Virgo, is it could be 95% beautiful, and Virgo will keep going, yeah, but there's that 5%, I need to fix that, I need to fix that, no, I need to fix that. So it's this perfectionism is what Virgo is about. Now that's great for Mercury, like I said before, because Mercury doesn't have as much of an emotional charge. Mercury is a neutral planet, whereas Venus is one of the feminine planets, which are about feeling good. So if you get Mercury in Virgo, it's not so overcome by that emotional quality of Venus, which wants to be happy. Venus has the desire to be happy. Mercury doesn't have the desire to be happy, by the way. Mercury has a desire to improve things more than anything. Mercury is where we notice details and we want to get them better. Mercury and Saturn are really the two planets that are neutral, and they're not charged with some kind of bias toward feeling good or getting something done, which is the masculine planets. So Mercury in Virgo can take that discernment and that perfectionism and do the right thing with it. Again, Virgo is ruled by Mercury. So that perfectionism is so that we adjust and we change something and we make it, and again, we make an adjustment, which is what Mercury does. Venus, it's kind of like, that's a similar kind of thing, but then we don't feel so good about it, particularly because, this person is doing it. And we're noticing how much we're not appreciated and how much I did this and they didn't do it as much, and we're just measuring it out to every little micron on the meter. When it's in Virgo, it doesn't feel so good. And so what can happen is that compromise that usually feels good to us in Venus, or with Venus, when it's in Virgo, we don't enjoy it so much. Whereas usually we do enjoy it. Think of how good it feels when you do something that makes someone happy that you love. Think of how good it feels. When something you like, you can share it with someone and they like it too. And think about when there's something that you do love, again, that you value, and you share it with someone and they don't like it. Big difference, right? Again, depending on what that thing is and how important it is to you and whatnot, this is what relationships are always about. It's this sliding scale of situations where we find out how to deal with that person, and we're willing to try to find those places where we do agree, and then the things that we don't, we try to find a way to not disrupt it or aggravate it, because we don't want to feel disrespected, we don't want them to feel disrespected, and so we kind of navigate around that. We sort of navigate this minefield. That's what Venus is good at. And it's with all things in life. It's all things, not even just with people. People, it's easier to see it, but with all things. Like, for example, anything that gives us happiness, like things like food or entertainment or anything that we're trying to enjoy, again, that we think is going to make us happy. Venus is the thing that's navigating these desires and this pleasure and this quality of life. And so we're always doing this with our desires. This is why Venus is so important, because it's the energy that we use to navigate our desires. And these are the things that come up as they become more subtle and refined. The strength of our Venus becomes more and more revealed. One second. For example, even navigating our senses through our physical body can be a challenge. It's easy to indulge, like with food that tastes good, for example, or other kinds, because that's just about pure pleasure. It's not about sharing it. It's like, I like the taste of this thing and I want to eat it. And I might want to eat a lot of it because it gives me pleasure. It doesn't give me happiness. Happiness is more refined, but it gives pleasure. Happiness is the next level. Happiness is where we share something with someone else. And again, now it becomes this thing that's much more refined, where maybe in order to share something with you, I have to package it in a different way. Maybe I can't share it with you the way I would love to share it. I have to kind of censor myself a little bit so that you can also enjoy it. Let's say like your love of astrology or something. Everybody in your life isn't exploding with enthusiasm for it. So in order for you to share it with them, you have to kind of, make it something that they can appreciate. Because maybe you've tried to share it before, and then people say, oh, that's stupid. Why do you like that? And it hurts your feelings, and it makes you mad at them. You're like, this is something that's important to me. Why can't you at least respect me enough to give it a chance? Something like that. So this is a more refined quality of Venus where we try to have other people where we're willing to accept things they like that maybe we think are stupid. We're willing to sit there and, act like we think it's important that they like, football or cricket. How come I do this for you? I act like this is important to me when it's not, but because it's important to you, I don't make fun of it. But then when I tell you something that's important to me, you make fun of it. Well, again, that's a classic Venus. Like, the issue isn't, the issue is that the other person doesn't care about you enough to at least listen or try to understand why you might like that. And then the relationships, this is how relationships then start to become about these issues, and we start to notice that. So again, that's a kind of, Venus is the planet that does that. And so you can see why, even on a relationship level, it's better if we're easily accommodated. If we can find happiness for no reason. Like, no matter what the other person says, we're still happy. You can see why that's better, just as a functioning sort of premise, right? Because then even if the other person is like that, maybe it doesn't bother us, but over time, maybe we start to feel unappreciated, which can often happen when Venus is in Pisces as well. We can feel unappreciated. But you can see why, if we're so hyper-literal and so hyper-focused on the person's response, that it's not so good either, because now we're noticing every little thing and every time that equation isn't right. And we don't necessarily notice it, correctly. We have a lot of selective discrimination here. We notice when we're not appreciated, but we probably don't notice as much when we're not appreciating the other person, although they'll be happy to remind us. Well, what about when you do this? Okay. That thing feels really good. The person likes doing that. In fact, when Venus is in Libra, the person might constantly create situations. This is Libra energy in general. And by the way, we have Sun and Mercury in Libra, but Libra will often create situations and create a situation that seems like it's out of balance just so they can bring it back into balance. This is why Libra can be very contrary in this way. When there's really nothing there, Libra, I'll say Libra people or the Libra energy, can look for something that's not in agreement and make a point of the thing that's not in agreement just so they can come back later and reach an agreement. The devil's advocate energy is definitely Libra energy. Libra can be very, subtle and not so subtle in that way. Libra can be the most devil's advocate with the scales, that's the sort of symbol where I don't know how many I have a lot of Libra friends because my moon is there and I have planets in Gemini, so I get along very well, but so much often is that kind of just conversations always have a subtle realm of disagreement with Libra. Not always, but often when people have a lot of Libra energy. Particularly if Venus has a couple strange issues going on with it or something, if Venus is not so settled, then there'll always be a kind of little bit of a point, like every little point is sort of contested so that it can then come back into balance. Oh, we worked through that. It's like, well, we worked through it. You worked through it. I'm sitting here while you're working through it. It's kind of what it is. I just bring this up because that's the nature of Venus, is to enjoy working through things. Again, in Libra, it's just kind of natural, easy to find the consensus, enjoys finding the consensus. In Virgo, it's not so enjoyable. So as we see, Venus is in Virgo as I record this on October 23rd, 2020. And you'll see it's going to be there for a while. Be there for at least about 3 weeks. 3 weeks and 4 days or so until the middle of November. So you might notice where there is, for the next few weeks, if you're in a relationship or with your friendships or whatever, that kind of sort of bean counting, I call it bean counting. You know, Virgo is kind of like the accountant. You know, it's kind of like the accountant, where it's, you know, counting every little thing. And again, Mercury is a good accountant because it's very accurate. Precision and accuracy is really important. But certain planets get kind of bogged down in that realm. So, but I will also say this about Venus in Virgo. Actually, let me just again say, because some people just came on. If you want to get I have a quick little mini course on improving relationships with Vedic astrology, where you can get hours of classes on relationship astrology. Just enter your name and email address here. It's free. It's one of the best things that relationships can really, or that Vedic astrology can really teach us, is relationships and how to improve our relationships and understand ourselves and our partners and whatnot. Many people, that's how they first got into astrology, is by wanting to understand themselves and their partners and whatnot. It really works. I should say it works really well on a, when you get down into a very precise sort of methodology. And, just in general, like sun sign astrology and this kind of stuff is the most sort of, disposable part of it. That's not really very important. But when you really understand the principles, like I've been explaining, like what Venus really is, what the signs are, how that expression can be most accurately, harnessed and elevated, then again, you really learn a lot about the subject itself, not just your chart and who you're more compatible with and all. Unfortunately, this is how not just astrology, but almost everything in life gets codified into the lowest common denominator, like the least valuable part of it, but is the most talked about, when when in fact the most valuable part of it isn't about your chart or anything. It's about the principles themselves. So, but again, for the next couple weeks, if you're watching this in October and into early November or into mid-November of 2020, it may feel like that whole sort of compromise thing is just, that doesn't feel so good right now. I think I'll just do something else, do my thing. It's good for doing your thing, honestly. Particularly if you're not in a relationship right now, or you're kind of, and again, even if you are, expect that whole thing just might not feel so good. And, one of the things about staying up to date with the astrology of any given time period, or with transits or whatever, is you can align with this energy. Whether you know it or not, the next couple weeks, the next few weeks, you're just not going to feel like doing that so much. There's going to be more scrutiny. You're going to maybe be noticing a lot more how you're not appreciated, and you're going to be maybe have a tendency to just not be feeling so elated about all of that energy, all that compromise. But so you can turn it inward. It could be about yourself. It could be about your own connection to Venus, especially through things like being creative and things that aren't about someone else making you happy, right? And so again, if you like, I see my friend Malini just said the same thing. Venus in Virgo can help intensifying practice of art forms, find beauty and happiness in art than in people. Yeah, that, and not just that, but certainly that as well, as I was saying. But it's also just, especially like with spiritual practices as well. And there's a lot of the charts of saints, like for example, Swami Shivananda had a debilitated Venus. In many ways, we're very sensual. In fact, we're too sensual. One of the things that yogis are trying to get us to do, or yoga is trying to get us to do, is not be so sensual. Again, and not put so much of our energy into, again, not just other people, but food and sexuality and overstimulation. The Marika houses, or the killer houses in astrology, are houses 2 and 7, which correlate to Venus archetype, because the second house has the correlation to Taurus, and the 7th house has the correlation to Libra. And this is why those two Marika houses, or those two killer houses, are that way, because we kill ourselves by what we eat, our patterns of consumption, the second house, what we value the most. Do we value the momentary pleasure of candy, or of like indulgent food? Or is our value system higher? Because as our values elevate internally, externally, they're not as expressed. We don't need something external to give us the experience. The value, the internal value, is more enduring. So instead of second house things, which are typically expressed in things like food and diet and our habits of consumption, as our values improve, those things also improve, and they're more rewarding. It's better to have good values and strong core values than some momentary pleasure. And also 7th house things, which also correlate to Libra things, which have to do with other people. And 7th house is also the house of sex and sexuality, and the energy that we lose doing it, not just the physical act of doing it, but the mental, emotional preoccupation with other people, and mainly sexual partners, romantic partners, marriage, and how much of our life gets put into that area of being in a relationship, and putting so much of our time, attention, and energy, and literally life force, because that's all we have is a life force. We're just a conduit of life energy. We're just a conduit of prana in yoga, prana, which courses through the body and the mind, and we only have so much of it. And again, the 2nd and 7th house, the 2nd house, literally, when I talked about that as it relates to food and vitality and values, in the yogic sense, this is prana. We eat food to get prana, or energy. That's what we're supposed to eat it for, life force. But then we can also harness that pranayama, which means controlling the prana, and not be so obsessed on other people. So again, both of these things, Venus is in charge of, actually. Those students who've ever really delved into the deeper chapters and pondered the deeper chapters of the Vedic astrology text Bret Prashrahora Sastra will see, in fact I outline it in this book here, The Ascendant, when you start looking in the chapter on the planets as house rulers, Venus, Parashara gives the rules for how the dominant bhavas work and all of these things, but then he starts to go through each ascendant and gives specific, he breaks the rules. And this is what's really interesting about pondering text like this, is that you see the rules, and the rules are important, and then you see him break the rules. And that becomes just as important. Because then when he breaks rules, he's showing you other rules. And he almost always, every time he starts to apply a rule where Venus is concerned, he breaks the rule in the against what you would expect from Venus, especially with things like Marika houses that I just mentioned, other times with Venus, because of this idea that our life energy and our prana and our preoccupation with happiness is really what takes our life away, ultimately. We eat too much, we're indulgent, we don't have maturity with the senses, and we're too preoccupied with other people, sexuality, and all the life force and energy that goes into trying to do that thing that I talked about. That's so much of why we're here and so much of what we're trying to work out. So Venus in Virgo shows where that's just not, that just doesn't feel so good for a while. We don't feel like doing it so much. So rather than be emotional about it, rather than take it out on your partner, rather than blame them and find fault with them and realize all this stuff for a while, it's a good time to just understand that it's there and introspect about literally, why this is going on as well. Because that's really what Virgo is also trying to do. And these great yogi masters like Swami Shivananda, I believe Gandhi as well had Venus debilitated. I'm not totally sure, but I know Swami Shivananda did. And he was very much about mastering the senses. And again, what you could wind up seeing with Venus in Virgo is that the senses just don't give that much pleasure and happiness as they do to others. It's just doesn't feel as good, or you don't derive the same pleasure from it. It brings dissatisfaction. So you can see why that could be really helpful on the spiritual path. So of all the debilitated placements, Venus is the one that I'm always the least bit concerned about. I wouldn't say that I think it's good, quote, because it shows what it shows, and I don't bring things into good and bad. But I know when someone has a debilitated Venus, that there's a lot of virtues in that as well, the ones I'm telling you. I also know the opposite is true. When someone has an exalted Venus, I'm not necessarily doing backflips for them either, because I know it's also brings a lot of complications. Because it's more subtle than that, but also just because I know when everything makes you happy, then you're just like, oh, happy, 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 happy. And it can just be another problem. So more than any other planet, Venus is the one where this is the most visceral for me. Jupiter is probably the other, although less so, but Jupiter is probably the other. I'm not as freaked out when I see Jupiter debilitated, nor as elated when it's exalted, because first it's only exalted in the first 5 degrees. When it starts to get far away from it, it's Jupiter in Cancer when it starts to get up, especially around 15, 20 and later. But I don't want to get too sidetracked. But I know, because I've also seen many times where Venus in Virgo is very creative for the reasons that I'm explaining, because we stop being so attached to partners and all that other stuff, and we bring it inward toward our own personal creativity, our own spirituality, and things like yoga, pranayama, mastering the senses, being mature about those things, being grown up about those things, really can settle into the person's mind and consciousness. So, again, if I'll put this again here. So again, if you want to get some more information about this, again, I do have a little mini course that I put together, Improving Relationships with Vedic Astrology. You probably really like. I'm going to go over some of their very practical steps that you can understand. I outlined some of them here, but that you can really use to understand relationships better, and also Venus and these principles better as well. So some other questions here, which I'm just not going to answer at the moment because I'm kind of a little pressed, and I wanted to just talk about it this way. But anyway, I hope things are going well, and I hope for the next few weeks this Venus in Virgo leads you to a deeper sense of creativity. Be kind to your partner. Don't blame them and stuff. That's the biggest thing to have to watch out for. And we'll take it from there. So